Hi sewing friends! After a bit of a gap, I have finally managed to make all the blocks for my recycled 1950s blanket quilt. So there's 3 other videos showing you how I went about cutting up the blanket and deciding how I was going to make the quilt and making the blocks. I'm calling it a log cabin scrappy quilt, but I actually made some wonky stars as well. So I just wanted to say, if you've recently subscribed or commented, thank you very much. It's much appreciated. Without that, I wonder why I'm doing this, to be honest, because I don't make any money out of it. I'm quite happy sewing, but I always wanted to share it with other people because that's how I got sewing again, was by watching people sewing, and I wanted to share what I'm doing as well. So it's lovely when you realise that there are other people out there who are interested as well, and so I really appreciate it when you get in touch. So in the video today, I'm going to show you the full extent of the complete mess I've made of my sewing room, finishing off the blocks. I'm also going to show you the blocks laid out on the bed in the order I think that I'm going to put them, and we're going to finish the quilt. So I hope you enjoy watching. So this is not an explosion in a fabric factory. This is actually my desk, my sewing table, and I'm a bit embarrassed about this, but if I was really embarrassed I wouldn't be showing you, would I? What it is I liken it to a palette of paints. So these are all my scraps and a few bits that weren't scraps. Here's the sewing machine. I finally got all the blocks finished, so let's go and have a look. Now, I did say this was going to be a scrappy log cabin quilt, didn't I? What I've got here is half wonky stars and half log cabins. Now, some of the log cabins are really, really patchworky, like this one, because I was using up scraps, so I was making strips out of pieces. So they are log cabins, but they're very patchy, scrappy log cabins. That's another one there. Because they're not all log cabins, okay, so my block, my template, my quilting square is 9.5 inches square. So I was able, say for instance with this one, for instance, to keep going until I got, so it's just a bit bigger than 9.5 inches. Now when I'm making these 9 blocks to make the wonky stars, I now realise some of them aren't quite big enough. Now, if you know the way I do my quilts, normally I just wing it and I sew them into strips and don't worry about it, and I get around it and I line them up and I trim them down. I'm not going to do that this time. I'm going to make sure that they're all 9.5 inches or more. So, because this quilt is using leftovers, to make up the squares that aren't quite at 9.5 inches, I'm going to use this piece of linen. Oh, it's cotton linen, so it's cotton, but it looks like linen. Now, in this light, it looks peachy, but it's kind of very, very, very pale pink. Now, I dyed this with avocado pips, avocado stones. If you've never done that, there's lots of videos online about how to use avocado stones to dye fabric. Now, this was one where I didn't put enough in. So it's a very, very, very washed out colour. But I did think I could probably get away with that to make up these blocks a bit bigger. So I've now squared off all of the blocks and laid them out pretty much how I want them, and I've decided to have sashing between and these little pieces that I've cut up. So they're 2.5 inches square, and then at the moment the blocks are lying on a sheet, and that's going to be the sashing, which I'm cutting 2 inches wide, so it'll have 1.5 inch strip in between. And I've got the blanket under here. If you've seen the earlier videos, you'll know that I'm recycling, upcycling a very old wool blanket that's been in my family since about 1959, but stuffed in a blanket chest and forgotten about. So I've brought it out, washed it and cut it up so that I can make 2 quilts out of it, and this is the first one. So there's the quilt, and there's the blanket underneath, just checking that I've got enough. Next step is to make the post and strip pieces to go round the blocks. So I've gathered up all of my blocks and I did number them. So I put the number in the top left hand corner of each block. They don't really have a direction, but I just thought I'd have them all going the right way based on how I laid them out in the plan. So I've got them all like that. I've also drawn myself a diagram of the quilt, and I've done this because I this time wanted to make sure that I didn't end up with too much or not enough of each of my pieces. So my quilt is going to have sashing around it with posts, and I've cut all the pieces out already. So here are my little squares, which will be going here in the corners, and then here are my sashing pieces, which are going around the edge of the plan. So I'm going to keep that next to me in case I get mixed up. So first of all, I'm going to attach just a sashing piece to the left hand side of each of my blocks. Then I'm going to sew a post to a sashing piece, and I'm going to sew those on the bottom like this. So I'm basically filling in, not the edge, I'm basically filling in one sashing piece and one post attached to a sashing piece, one sashing piece and one post attached to that sashing piece. I'm going to do that for all the inner pieces like this. I'm ignoring the outside at the moment. And then for the blocks that are in the corners, so for instance this will be one of them because this is number 1. This is number 1, and I started counting in the top left hand corner here. Then that will have an edge as well. So first of all, I'm just going to attach the 36 sashing pieces to the left hand side of each of my blocks. So I'm pressing these towards the dark side because the sashing is white. These parts, and then I'll be pressing the sash pieces and the posts in the same way, and then I'll be sewing those like this. So I thought it might help to explain this with the help of a little diagram. So what I've done so far is attach the left hand sash piece to every block, and I've marked that on my diagram. So if you're thinking of making a quilt in this way, it's probably a good idea to draw it on a piece of paper like this. I just printed out a grid on my computer and then I coloured it in. So the parts marked in pink are the ones I've already attached. So now I've sewn a post to a sash, and these are going to be going underneath here, so these here, along here. Now the corners need special treatment, and I've numbered all of my blocks. Now if you were just going to make a quilt like this, but your blocks were going to be just the same colour all inside, or they were going to be two different colours alternated or something like that, but mine sort of matter where they go. And so the idea about doing a quilt like this is you're not just sashing long strips, which can be a little bit awkward to handle. If you assemble each block with its sash around it ready to be put into the quilt, once they're in there, you've got the whole quilt done. In my case, I care where each block goes because of how it looks, so I've numbered them. So at the moment I've put the left hand sash on all of them. I'm going to now put the bottom sash and post in, and then the edge ones are going to be handled separately, which I'll show you in a moment. So here are all the blocks laid out as they will be in the quilt. So if you think of each of the blocks as having a L attached to the left hand side and bottom of it, and because the overall quilt is also got on the left hand edge an L on each block here, it means that we're almost finished. We've almost added all our posts and blocks, and by the posts I mean the squares at the corner of the L, if you like. So the only thing we need to do now is to finish off this side. So overall the quilt has got all of its sashing and posts in between the gaps. It's got this left hand edge done and the bottom done. So now what we need to do is lift up the right hand blocks and add a sash and a post all the way down here, and then we need to lift the top up, the top ones as well, and do those differently and add a sash and a post along the top, and then all of our blocks will be ready with our edging on. And it means that we can then sew them together as normal in rows, and then join the rows together and line everything up, and we will have our quilt our quilt top will be finished. So I hope looking at it like this has helped you. I hope it's helped you to picture it, to see how it can be done. I will say that the thing that really helps is drawing it out on a piece of paper, just freehand, and just counting up your sashes, count your sashing strips, counting up your blocks, counting up your posts, your little squares, And if you get muddled up at any point, just go back to your diagram, and that really does help. So the next stage now is to pick out these ones and finish off the edge of the quilt. So I just need to add this to this block. So what I've been doing is actually pinning the seam line here where the post goes, and it's worked quite well because I've ended up with a nice crisp corner there. So this is a UK superking bed, and I like to make square quilts. So this is a 6x6 block quilt. The original blocks are wonky stars and log cabins up to 9.5 inches, and then I have put the sashing on top of that, and the sashing measures 2 inches. The sashing strips were 2 inches and then sewn with a 1/4 inch seam allowance, so down to 1.5 inches. And as you can see, this covers the top of the quilt. It covers the top of the bed. So I like square quilts because it means that on a superking bed like this, it covers the top. You can then put it on a single bed if you want, and it won't swamp the bed. You also can then put it on a sofa or use it as a throw, and it won't be too big. So this is just to give you an idea of the size. And I've now finished all the sashing, and it's ready to be sewn together. So hopefully, based on the plan, you can see how it's possible to work out what needs to go on each block, but they are still distinct blocks, and once they're all sewn together, they'll all line up. You've got no unwieldy large long strips of sashing to deal with, and then you get to a certain point and it's all a bit squiffed sideways. And as I say, I've numbered mine because it was important to me where each block went. If these centres were just one fabric, it wouldn't matter so much, but in my case it did matter. So, now ready to sew together and finish the quilt top. So here's the quilt top finished. It's taken me a little bit longer than I expected to get to this stage. So I know I said I was finishing the quilt. The next video will be me finishing it. Which will be in a few days. If you've enjoyed watching, please like and subscribe, and welcome any comments, and check back soon for the final video when I'm going to add the blanket layer, which is this very old 1959 blanket that I found in a blanket chest in the family home, and I'll be putting a backing on, which will also be something upcycled, but I don't know what yet, and binding it. Thanks for watching.